Good afternoon, botpreneurs, or good evening, good morning, depending on where you are on the globe. Today we have another great session for you guys. It's called Analyzing Trainer Data to Maximize NLP Performance. We have Benoit Alvarez on the show. Hi, Benoit. How are you doing?
Hello.
You're broadcasting from the UK at the moment.
Yes, we are. Yeah, lovely UK.
Yeah,
Sunny
rainy,
and
same
cold.
as in Netherlands. So, you are CTO of Volume.ai, AI agency, and one of the things you focus on is big brain bots. And if I'm correct, you launched last summer Qbox, which is a separate platform people can use to optimize their NLP engine. So I hope you want to take us a bit to the journey you guys went through, what you did, what you learned, what you're gonna do, and I guess you experienced the pain points yourself during one of the projects Volume AI did for clients, and that's how the idea arose. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, Qbox was born a little bit by accident. Volume as a company, and that's the company behind Qbox, build enterprise chatbot for a number of clients, and we have been doing that for 4 years now. And in the early days, we quickly found out some major challenge in building, good quality chatbot, and mainly the training data that goes with. And as we were trying to solve those challenges for our internal purpose, we ended up, we are developers, so we are lazy by trade. So we don't like to redo manual things over and over and over again. And testing those data models were very complicated and time consuming. So we started to automate it, solve the problem for an internal purpose. And at some point, we ended up talking to Gartner and the Gartner analyst, and they were very interested into how we build chatbots, how we get the performance out of the NLP engine, and so on, so on. And we say, yeah, we have this cool internal tool that help us doing it at pace, very, very fast, and so on. So we show them, and they say, wow, that seems quite awesome. And do you know that your problem that you are facing is very similar to a lot of problems that a lot of people are facing? So you should think about opening this piece of software up, and so we did.
Cool. Yeah, that's how the best things are created, right?
Exactly.
So you never considered creating your own NLP engine, but the idea was right away to build something on top of the existing ones, correct?
Yeah, that's very much correct. What you find out is, we people out there can build NLP engine, and it's getting easier and easier and easier. But I think a full sense of need for building their own NLP engine, it's because they can't extract the best out of commercial NLP engine. I always say, and it's very true in a lot of AI problems, the data will get you 90-95% of the performance. The algorithm itself will give you a little bit more, but and that's what we find. We find a lot of customers asking us, "Oh, this provider is crap. Can you Can you give me which one is the best?" I'm like, doesn't really matter until you really mastered the quality of your training data and understand that this training data need to be fine-tuned to the engine you use. So yeah, building our own NLP engines, definitely possible, but once I have maximized what I can get from the commercial NLP engine, and you have to admit, except for an issue of security where you will want something to be in your network and so on, the reason for building your NLP engine is very low from our experience.
Yeah. So which platforms do you guys currently support with Qbox?
Oh, we support most major platforms, so IBM Watson Assistant, Microsoft Louis, Microsoft Q&A Maker, which is the latest one, Google Dialogflow, Facebook Wit, Amazon Lex, Rasa. So that should be 7 of them. And yes, we are in discussion with a couple more big providers to integrate in the next few months. So yeah, it's going pretty well actually.
Yeah, that sounds great. And we got quite some viewers already. Thanks for watching, guys. Please just type your questions as a comment and we can tackle them right away or at the end. Yeah, so maybe you can quickly take us through the process that Qbox supports. Yeah, it starts with connecting to one of your providers or more than one. What comes after that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the way Qbox and the philosophy behind Qbox is very much how can we understand the training data and the quality of that training data, but at a machine perspective, not as a human perspective. And can we run a series of tests from that training data that people have built their model on, and trying to understand, is this training data make sense at the model perspective? And what we do is we are going to take your training data from your chatbot. So all providers just allow you to download a JSON or a zip file for Dialogflow or whatever it might be. You upload that into Qbox. Qbox takes this training data. You will select what provider you want to run. It's not because you have downloaded your training data from Watson that you want to test it on Watson. You might say, oh, let's see how it performs on Louis. So you can do that with Qbox. But you are going to you are going to upload your training data, and what we are going to do is we are going to create a number of models on that platform you have selected. We are going to create a series of models and run a series of tests across all those different models. And we are going to cross-reference all those results and give you pictures of actually what pieces of training data are making sense, what pieces of training data are creating ambiguity in your models, and ultimately which one work, which one do not work. And what's quite interesting is that Qbox will give you a performance at model levels. So at your model levels, you are going to have a set of performance from 0 to 100. And you are going to have the same metrics at intent levels, so at individual intent. So you're going to be able to see, yeah, my model performed very well. That's great as an average. But actually, I have a couple of intent that are not performing that well, or all intent perform well. It doesn't matter. Once we do the analysis at intent levels, we also do an analysis at utterance levels. So we're going to analyze every single utterances and tell you which one, makes sense to the model, which one create ambiguity. And we go even deeper than that. Once we have done the analysis at utterance level, we'll do the analysis at word levels. What word influence the predictions one way or another? And that's actually, we have released that maybe a month ago, and that was on the back of a research paper called LIME, LIME. And this research paper was all about how can you try to understand the predictions. All right, how can you try to make some intuition on that predictions, and how can you try to give a steer about why this prediction is the way it is? So we read the research paper, obviously, and we adapted it to our own use case, and creating this analysis. So you have a lovely model levels, intent levels, utterance levels, word levels. And when you have those analyses, what you can do is you can infer where the problem may come from. And where it's very, very important is that in commercial NLP engine, so the one we support, the only dial you have to fine-tune performance is your training data. It's nothing else. Okay.
Yeah.
And so it's super important to really understand, what makes sense and what doesn't make sense at the model perspective. And an interesting aspect of it is we have some of our clients, and one of our clients used multiple providers actually, and they have multiple people taking care of those chatbot models. And it's funny because they said to us, "Oh, our it's not data scientists, but I would say chatbot trainers. Our chatbot trainers know what Louis like." And it's funny how they say what Louis like. It's like, it's like I know how to fine tune. I know the dark heart in order to get the maximum performance of Louis through my training data, through the only dial I can use. So yeah.
But yeah, that's basically impossible for a human to find out.
Yeah, it can be very difficult.
You need this automation you guys offer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the three important metrics are correctness, confidence score, and stability. That's correct, right?
Yes, correct. Yes.
And,
yeah. So
stability is especially interesting because you can predict how well it will remain in the future with new changes.
Absolutely. Actually, we renamed that to clarity, but clarity, stability, it's very, very much the same. But yeah, so those three metrics were very important. We tried at the beginning to give a global score of the performance of your model, and we found out that was not giving a clear pictures of where could be the problems. And if you take those three metrics, correctness, confidence, and clarity, if you take them one by one, correctness is how correct is the model at predicting the right intent. Okay, so if you have some set of blind data, or which you can run through Qbox, or if you use what Qbox use, which is some kind of leave one out technology, or modified version of the leave one out technology. So you will take a question, you will know what questions, where does this question belong, and you will ask this, you will remove it from the training data and ask this question to the model. And it's important for the model to predict the correct intent, of course. And that's where the correctness metrics come from. Regardless of the level of confidence this prediction comes from, it's what is the first predictions. And a lot of providers are providing more than one predictions. For example, if you take Louis or Watson, they will give you the top 10 predictions, the first one being the most confident, and so on, so on, so on.
Yeah.
So we are really looking at, is the first one the one we were expected? And that is all the metrics about correct. How correct is my model at predicting the right output, which is the most important. But one that is good, what you want to know is okay, am I predicting with confidence? So if we take a typical examples that people tend to understand, if my question is, should I take an umbrella today? Okay, I'm inferring a question about the weather. If it predict the weather intent, that's good correctness, but it might predict the weather intent at 20% confidence only. Okay, and that will not give you a great confidence score. So that's why, even if you're correct, you want to look at the confidence. And that's how we are going to build this confidence matrix. It's just like, how confident are we into the right predictions?
Yeah.
And the last one and more important one, and it's the one we struggled the most in the early days, because we were having those models and they had good correctness, they had good confidence. We say, oh, that's solid. And the model was working well, and to a typical question, it was answering correctly. And let's say, to the question about banking, it was answering correctly. And we would modify something in a slightly different area of the model. Let's say personal information. Okay, so we will modify a piece of some training data on that area, maybe because it didn't perform as well as we wanted. And all of a sudden, the question that used to work yesterday didn't work anymore. And we're like, it's not possible. I was having the correct intent yesterday, and I was having a great confidence, and today I'm having a completely wrong intent with a lot of confidence on that prediction. And that's where was born the clarity matrix, which is about, you're correct, you're confident, but how clear are you about your predictions? How certain are you about your predictions? So typically the way, it's quite complicated, the algorithm behind it, but the way I like to explain it is, if you think about the 10 prediction you get returned from a Lewis or from a Watson, if the first prediction is the weather intent at 80%, but the second best predictions is the personal information at 79%. It looks correct. It looks confident. It's going to be great for the user because the user gets what he wants.
Yes.
But tomorrow, change in the models might make this one leapfrog the other one.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's where you end up from something that was great to something that ensures the wrong things to the user. So that's where we are looking at the a number of metrics, but the distance between the first prediction and the second prediction tells you how likely you are to have regression in the future. And this regression is very important because what people don't always realize in NLP, it's what we like to call internally the ripple effect or the regressions.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, NLP, especially in chatbots, so NLP classification, so predicting an intent, it's a classification problem. And AI is pretty good at classification problem in general. If you take image classifications, we are pretty awesome now at doing image classifications. But if you think about it, the number of images you have in an image classifier algorithm, it's pretty big. I mean, we are talking about tens of thousands of images of a cat and 10,000 images of a dog, and so on, so on, so on. In NLP, one of the problems is you tend to have intents that doesn't have 10,000 training data, 10,000 occurrences. You tend to have in the tens, or if you're lucky, in the hundreds. And if you make a correlation between image classifications and NLP classifications, imagine now you have an image classifier of dog, cat, and tiger. And imagine you have only 20 images of dogs, 20 images of cats, and 20 images of tiger. It might classify okay, all right. But now let's say you add another 20 images of tiger. How is that going to impact the correctness of your cat classifier? It's likely to have an impact because you start to really, really well define or define much better tiger than cat. And if you take NLP, it's very, very, very much the same. So what's happened is sometimes you modified an intent here and you modified its training data, but you have a ripple effect on the other side, on another intent that you haven't planned. So being able to foresee that, being able to say, with great correctness, great confidence, and great clarity, I'm unlikely to have ripple effect that flip my result around in the future. That's very important, and that's how we build here a model that we tend to not have to firefight them.
Yeah. So then you get the suggestion, please add also some new utterances or delete some on the other intent.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and I remember in the early days, and I'm not going to name the provider that advises that, but one of the big NLP provider used to say to us, hey, you know what? It's NLP, it's simple. You look at your user logs, you look at if they are correct, you do some review, you look at they are correct. If you find a question from a user that was not correct, you just add it to the classifier. That's about the worst advice you can get. I mean, at least we tried it tens and tens and tens of times. It doesn't work because the NLP problems compared to other problems is not about quantity of data, of training data. It's about the quality of that training data. And I read somewhere, I don't remember, someone did a bit of a study, and they were looking at the performance versus the amount of training data. And they were saying per intent, from 25, you start to, from 25 to 50 pieces of training data, you are not gaining a lot more performance out of it. And we have had clients that have had 200 pieces of training data in an intent, and you find out it doesn't really matter. What's very important is the quality of that training data more. So a lot of advice that we give is just don't add. Sometimes if you see something that is not working, you really want to look at the training data you have and how you can modify this training data to either insert the concept you have uncovered, or to try to cover some kind of format that the sentence that is not working comes in. I'm sorry, I'm a bit technical here, but
No, but
it's very important that people don't believe it's a brute force problem, that the more training data you throw to it, the better it's going to get. We have not seen it working on our side at volumes, and we have tried, believe you me.
Yeah. But is it true that one NLP provider needs a little more utterances per intent than the other to perform optimal?
Yeah, there are some people, especially the less advanced NLP provider, require a lot more training data. But again, it's very difficult to give a number to that, because it depends what your intent is meant to cover. If I take an example, if an intent is meant to cover 2-3 concepts of a subject, or 2-3 ways to express the concept of a subject, you will want 4, 5, 6 utterances per concept it try to cover. And that's more guidance, because we have seen people that have very, very broad intent, because that's the way they cover the subject. And in this case, they might require a little bit more training data than other models where you have very well defined small intent for very particular problems. And in this case, you might end up with 15, 20 training data that are performing absolutely well. Other thing that people need to be really, really cautious of is the unbalance of that training data. So we have a model with 200 pieces of training data in one intent and 5 in another intent. And if those intent are anywhere slightly related, the 5 training data has no chance whatsoever.
Yeah. So balance is important, and quality as well, of course. Somebody asked if that provider was Chatlayer by any chance, but you said you didn't want to mention the name, so let's keep it.
No, because I mean, it's very interesting. We have our, performance is and true absolute performance is somewhat temporary. If you were going to ask me who is the best provider 18 months ago or 24 months ago, I would have said IBM Watson Assistant, head and shoulder above everybody else. Okay. I'm not sure what's happened, but what I know is right now, if you take Dialogflow, if you take Microsoft Fluis, they have really, really catch up, if not, gone a little bit better than IBM Watson. But I'm sure the guys from IBM are not resting on it, and I'm sure they are going to bring some improvement. So who is the best? Very, very, very temporary. Things we are not seeing, and I don't know why, but we are not seeing a lot of improvement from wheat. We would love to see a lot of improvement from wheat, but for the moment we are not. I don't know why. And within our user base, and if you take Qbox, I think last month, at the start from last month, but we tested 3,500 models, so it's quite a nice range. 95% of those models are split through 3 providers. The third one was IBM Watson at 29%. The second place was Google Dialogflow at 30 something. And the first place was Microsoft Louis at 35% of our market. So I'm talking about our market for our user.
Yeah, so that will probably be mainly English, but it's good to mention that you guys, the platform operates language independent. If you
Absolutely.
can connect your NLP provider, you can analyze the language you use there, of course.
Absolutely, because the way we do it is we take your training data to whatever language, and we train these models on the provider that you have decided. The only cautious you have to have is, for example, Turkish, which is a language that is not used across all provider. I know it's supported on Louis, but it might not be supported on Watson. So if you try to do conversions, this might not work.
No. Got a question coming in from Hemang. Great that you're watching. Yeah, can you give some examples of qualitative versus quantitative data in NLP, similar like the cat versus tiger example you gave? So,
in terms of number, yeah, I mean, we build a number of large models here at the company for clients, and I'm just thinking what I can say, what I can't say, but for a second, but we have models with 120 or 150 intents, and the range of training data you have per intent is maximum of 50 and a minimum of 10, 12, So within that range, we find that the sweet spot for us and in the way we build model. And that seems to hold true across a number of clients as well.
Yeah, I think if you have a lack of entities, you might end up creating a lot of utterances, but entities can take out that need for huge amount.
A lot of the problems we see in client models, because we have a number of clients that come and say, "Oh, my model doesn't work. Can you help?" It's the basis, the foundation of that models, and sometimes you can get only up to a level of performance within the structure, within the foundation you build. So when I'm talking about the foundation is your strategy around intent versus entity. What's going to be an intent, what's going to be an entity, and how you are going to play with that. And us, on a personal journey, we have seen that for a client, we build a model on a strategy, and we are going to find a ceiling on the performance. And when you find these ceilings, it's just the first clue that you might be able to get better in terms of strategy. So it's not uncommon that after a year or 2 years of being live, you might have gone through 2 or 3 different strategies of how you build your intent entity.
Yeah. And of course, your company changes over time and the questions change. So it's a dynamic thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Somebody confirms that 12 to 50 qualitative utterances sounds good for intent training. Yeah.
And if you think about it, it's a way, and I will not pretend to understand exactly the way a Microsoft Louis or Dialogflow works. But if you think about it, those guys have trained those models with some level of language understanding, depending of the different languages used, and I always say, if you have to try to understand it without knowing it, think about it as being transfer learnings. And the way transfer learning works is, if you take a neural net, you take the input layer out, the output layer out, and when you create an intent, for example, that's one output layer out, and when you bring utterances, it's input layer in, and so on. And that's why it doesn't require masses of training data, because the core of it, the core of the understanding of English language, for example, has been already trained. What you want is to train for the specific that is your subject matter.
Yeah. And I read on the website, you say the trick is to look at training data like an NLP provider does, and not like a human might look at it. Yeah, does this have to do that we humans tend to apply business rules and knowledge we have, and that the NLP engine might not or not yet be able to apply?
Yeah, that's very correct. I mean, the best way I can put it across is as simple as that. The way we learn language as human, the way we interpret language, has nothing to do with the way machine interpret language. We are not interpreting language by we are not a neural net. We are not interpreting language the same way. So sometimes what makes sense to us as a sentence from word 1 to word 10, for example, and the way it's positioned and the way they are positioned and so on, and the length of the sentence and everything else, small modification of that sentence will make no difference to us human. Okay, but will make a massive amount of difference in the training data. And that's what we are saying. We are saying, the way you teach a machine is not the way we have been taught. And as a human, if I start to use this kind of way of thinking, like, this piece of training data makes sense to me to go in this intent, so surely it has to make sense to the machine. You can't use that because analogy do not hold true. So you have to, start like that, obviously, with the way you bootstrap your model and so on. But then after to say, is that true? And if something like Qbox or confusion matrix or whatever tell you that might not be true, then don't get necessarily frustrated about it, or don't try to say why is that not true because it makes sense to me. Just try to see what are the fine tuning you can do within that sentence, the small change you can do to help making sense to the machine.
Yeah.
And it's still, it's what people absolutely need to understand is training an NLP engine. It's still a very empirical process. Qbox will give you tons of analysis, and it will give you plenty of information. And we are trying to work on a giving you a solution for it, but we are not there yet, because it's still very much like, okay, yes, I understand what is the problems. But as a user, as a chatbot trainer, I might not know exactly what the solution, but just try something. And that's one of the beauty of Qbox. It's going to pinpoint to you where the problem is. And then you go to your NLP provider, you modify some training data, but just try to modify only a few pieces of training data, add, remove, do whatever you think is right, and test it again. And Qbox will straight away make a comparison between the previous test and the new test, and it will tell you actually you got better or you got worse and so on. And that's where it's very empirical, like a lot of AI problem, to be honest. But it's just you have to try and see. And that was our biggest challenge before having Qbox. It's just like we were doing k-fold and leave one out, and we were building a confusion matrix, and that was taking hours.
Yeah.
And because it was taking hours, we are modifying 20 intent at the time. But 20 intent with 20 ripple effect, some were good, some were bad, obviously, but we couldn't really learn what helped and what didn't help. With Qbox, you run a test, a model with 5,000 questions will run in, or 5,000 iterances will run in 2 minutes. So then you find a very specific problem on one intent, couple of iterances, you try to sort them out, you run a test, Qbox will tell you, yeah, we got better. Then you move to the next problem and so on. And from there, you kind of, exactly what I was saying earlier, you kind of learn for each type of problems, what type of solution this technology likes.
Yeah. And is Qbox also listening to the conversations? So will it will it do something with unmatched utterances, or can you also import that or connect that it's constantly looking what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. Very good questions. Qbox has two modules. One is how can you get as best as you can with the training data that you have? How can you maximize the performance so the day you go live, you have done the best you could, and it's not your customer telling you actually it's crap. And then we have this say, we have this say where Qbox transform crapbot into intelligent chatbot, and we love it. That's very much our mission. So we have all this kind of how do I make the most of my training data, and that's the main module that most Qbox users use. But for enterprise user, we also have a monitoring tools, and this monitoring will listen to or will retrieve the logs from the user, and from that logs, it will extract. So we have this client, for example, it has 10,000 conversations a day, but you need to do audits on those 10,000 conversations a day. How do you do audits on 10,000? You can't. There is not enough man hours, or you need to really push subject matter expert time.
Yeah.
So it's how do you put in front of reviewer the utterance or the question from user that are the most likely to be wrong, and that's what Qbox does. Qbox, when it look at the logs, it extracts a number of logs. A reviewer will review those logs. From this review, Qbox will learn what a good interaction looks like and what a bad interaction looks like for that particular models. And from there, the next extract, it will extract things that are even more likely to be wrong. And from that, it will keep going, and ultimately extract only the one that are the most likely to be wrong. And one of the beauty is because of all this marking and all this review being done, Qbox then has the opportunity to say, okay, if you review that particular sentence, understand that sentence go to that intent and you confirmed it as a human. So I can build that as ground truth. And I can go slightly around this ground truth, not too far from that original sentence. And if I see that in further logs, I can classify it for you. I can say, yeah, that's correct. Don't spend time reviewing something that is absolutely right, because I can tell you it's absolutely right. So this client we have with 10,000 interaction a day about, after 3 months of reviewing, I think they were doing a review every 2 days. So after 3 months of building this ground truth and so on, get 70% of all their logs automatically reviewed by Qbox.
Yeah.
And only 3,000. Then after they extract a bit from those 3,000 and so on. So.
Yeah, that keeps it manageable way better.
Exactly.
Amit asks, can you name any specific model or entity extractor when you have to train tens of thousands of entities for your bot?
Can you repeat that question again for me?
Yeah, it's a lot of high number, but any specific model or entity extractor you can suggest when you have to train tens of thousands entities for your bot?
No, not really in commercial engine. In commercial engines, you don't have to bring this level of data. I mean, we have clients with huge model using Qbox. We have a client that has 26,000 utterances, for examples, and it has 600 or 700 intents. So huge models, but it doesn't mean it's not because you have huge model that you should necessarily have per intent huge amount of training data. And again, it's because the concept behind it are very similar to transfer learning.
And to get back to the platform, the actual adjusting and fine-tuning of your engine happens on the engine side, or can things also be adjusted at the Qbox side?
Yeah, it does happen on the engine provider side, and it's because one is those guys are doing a great job at giving training tools, and you take Luis, you take Watson, and so on. All those guys have great training tools. What we feel they lack, and where we feel we can add value, it's more on the analysis of the training data. I know a lot of providers are starting to give a little bit of help around, this might be a good deterrent, this might not be a good deterrent, and so on. But from our client perspective that have tested it, they believe that Qbox is giving a lot more insight than what the provider do, so which is great for us.
Yeah, exactly. And users can, people who are interested can just sign up as a free login, right? And you can do test runs.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, of course, they can book a demo if they want to see the full power of what you guys built.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have a number of. It's a very simple license models where you have a number of tiers, from standard to enterprise, or from startup to enterprise. And what we have is we have a free trial, and it's very simple because it's not like you have to put your credit card in advance or so on. No, you just give your email address. It can be even a Gmail if you want, if you don't want us to know your company, and you will be able to use the fine-tuning modules 10 times. So you can upload your data, upload your training data, see how it reacts, and try to read the result and so on. We have a number of videos that help around how do you interpret result, because it's still an analytic tools, so you need to know how to learn how to read the result, and as you said, if you struggle, book a demo and we'll do a 30-minute demo where we tend to explain quite a bit of things. But one of the nice things we have implemented is a kind of a walkthrough. So as you register, you have a sample model. So when you arrive and you logged in the first time, you have a sample models you can run through. So you press the button and it's going to take you on a tour, and it's going to say, press there, here's the data, here is the intent, here is why we decide to take this intent and look at that intent, here is the problem, and can you see why is this problem? So it's going to give you a full run through how to upload the models, to look at the result, to find out pain points or lack of performance, and to analyze it, to fix it, and to run it again.
Cool. Question coming in from Eduardo. Do you agree that you should only consider to train expressions coming from end users for which the NLP has returned a wrong intent prediction, or a very low confidence correct intent?
No, I mean, so only using expression. I mean, I know a lot of people are saying that. A lot of people are saying your model should represent what your people says. However, the people express themselves, especially when they are not native speaker like me in English, can vary quite slightly, and you want to cater for all use case, not only the main use case. So if you train a bot in English, for example, and you're a French guy like me talking to this bot, I'm not the main use case. So if you train, with utterances from your user, I have almost no chances. And utterances from user are important because they represent grand truth, but it doesn't mean you have to use it as such. Okay, it doesn't mean you cannot fine tune it. For example, how you're going to use your intent, how you're going to use your entity within that intent. Sometimes you may get a question that, so let me take you a simple example. A simple example is, what are you teaching the model? And sometimes you want to teach the model that some of the words are not important and some of the words are very important. and you might not get this balance within your user logs. Okay, so when you don't have this balance in your user words or sentence or examples, how do you make that happen? If you start to say, this word or this type of word, if in all your examples they are at the end of the sentence, and all of a sudden you find out someone is asking with this very similar word, but at the beginning of the sentence, how is that going to affect your classification? It will. I can tell you it will, because what you have taught the models is, hey, look, here are all my samples, and here is where the words are positioned, and here is, you know how it does all the analysis and so on of the verb and so on. But it doesn't mean all your users are going to ask it like that. And the second problems of using user logs is, where did you get your user log from? Okay, if you got it from your chatbot, it means you have a chatbot that might be good and live. In this case, do you really need to fiddle with your data, training data? Or did you put something bad, and that's quite a risk for a brand? And if you have a bad chatbot, do you think the user is going to give you some relevant content? Other people say to us, we have tons of support emails. Mm-hmm. But the way users express themselves through emails, it's not the way users express themselves through chatbot. So how relevant is that data? So that's why I'm a real big advocate of, yes, get some logs. Yes, get data from any sources you can find, but it needs some work. It needs some work. And I have seen people using really a brute force methods to training a model to say, I'm going to throw 400 utterances to that intent because I found out, and that should cover it. I haven't seen a great success out of those techniques.
Okay, that's interesting learnings. And maybe can you tell us something about the product roadmap you guys have for the coming months, maybe year?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are working a lot on how do we get more insight on entities. Okay, very important, because we only, we are concentrating a lot around the performance of your intents through the utterance, and of course utterance are represented with entity inside, and that we all cover. But how can we also look at the predictability of the entities? So we are doing a lot of that. We are coming in the next few months before the end of the year. It's going to be all an analytics tools in terms of where should you put your confidence threshold. Okay, so how do you decide your confidence threshold in your chatbot? And it's very use case dependent. So for example, we are working for banks, and the banks prefer to not have false positive, even so they automate a little bit less. And sometimes you work for information website, and that's maybe less of an issue. So we are working on a system that will show you the level of accuracy you get and the level of automation you get depending of where you put your confidence threshold, but also it will tell you about all the false positive, i.e. all the answer you answer wrong depending of your confidence threshold. So that's coming. So yeah, a lot of, and the big one, but that will take a little bit more time, is how do you visualize conflict in your models at, imagine, I won't say too much around it because this is a big trade secret, but imagine you could visualize in 2D or 3D your intent, the size of that intent, depending of its training data, and the collisions it might have with other intents, depending of the conflict and the overlaps. And really the idea is to say, before even looking at your utterance, is your basis absolutely wrong? Have you built your model on wrong basis? And that is really trying to say to people, be very careful, because we have done it several times. You build the same model with 2 or different strategy, and you have a strategy that works so much better than the others. So we are really looking to crack that.
Cool. Yeah, it would be awesome. But I can imagine you sometimes see clients using your platform and that they make some fundamental mistakes. But will you also contact them proactively as a more consultancy, or send them emails? Hey, you should maybe check this out or that out.
Absolutely, and as much as we are not in the business of fixing other people's models, we do that for a few companies that have maybe a bit less experience in NLP, where they will come to us and will say, I don't understand because I try my best, but Qbox give me only 40%, confidence and so on. And we will either spend a tiny bit of time to say, hey, look, it seems that here, for example, is an example where you should use a little bit more intent or entity, sorry, or we'll take the consultancy work as, let us give you either some proper feedback or build a model for you, which we do as well.
Yeah, great.
But often, and often for a lot of company, when we build the model for them, and that's very important for us as well, is to build it with them, so they learn through the process. Because one is we are not in the business of doing consultancy, and two is ultimately we want people to take care of their models. We want Qbox to help the subject matter expert, not the NLP specialist, the subject matter expert, to be in charge of their training data. And that's why you need to give visualizations and empirical process that help people to understand that training data.
Great. Yeah, I think we are running through all our questions. Just wondering what do you think will happen in the conversational AI space the coming, say, 2-3 years? What will be important new developments? Maybe also on the NLP side, of course.
Yeah, I mean that's a $1 million question, isn't it?
Yes.
My view of it is, I know a lot of people are working on the Nirvana view, which is something that self-learn from user interactions and so on. I have seen some stuff from some of the big providers in R&D mode. That seems to have some tractions, but when you are only at R&D mode, it's 3 years at least, if not 5 years down the line. I know a lot of people are really looking into the MRC technology, so machine reading comprehensions, and again, we are using it for some of our clients actually here on small, very, very small documents. So very, like imagine 2 pages document max, and that works well. And I know we get a lot of inquiries around, I have these 20 documents of 40 pages. I want the chatbot to read that and to understand that and to answer a question about it. I just, I don't see that happening anytime soon without a lot of human training behind it. So the intent type model and intent type technology, I think have a good 3 years in front of them. Is that going to stay like that in 5 to 10 years time? No, I think maybe we will change it, and there will be improvement made there. I think machine reading comprehension is really impressive technology. So if they can really work through the bottleneck of it works with a 2 pages of information, it doesn't work with a 40 pages information, that's fine. I think a lot of people are trying to solve the problem by doing very, very custom models for their clients, and that's all fine, but it's just unmaintainable by those clients. Meaning, you've solved a very short-term problems, but as soon as you are going to change, you're either stuck with that provider or that SI or system integrator for life, really. So I don't think that will really have a lot of inroads. I think there is a bit of a scaling issue on intent type models, because how many intent can you build, and what the limits. But we have done some R&D ourselves around model controller and controller versus slave models, where you have major models at the top that is really, let's say if you have 10 models, okay, with like, let's say 100 intent in each models, okay, and those are for different subject matter or whatever, and so that's 1,000 intent overalls. And your model controller, it's only going to be 10 intent, and these 10 intents are model 1, model 2, model 3, model 4, model 5, model 10. And what you do is you make the controller decide what model it should go to, and after the model itself, the slave models to answer the questions. I think that's is solving the scaling issue that people are having.
Yeah. Well, it's an exciting future ahead, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to thank you for sharing your insights and experience. A great session. Yeah, in 2 weeks we have a new Facebook Live session with Joe Farrell, the CEO of the Chatbot Summit, that will take place in December in Berlin again. Maybe we see you guys there, maybe not. Would be good to meet in real life. But thanks for now, and good luck building Qbox to the next level.
Thanks for having me, and it was a pleasure to talk with you. And I watch your show quite often, and I really truly enjoy it.
Thanks, that's great to hear. Okay, have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.